I remember the first time I drove down that Lakeside road at night. The forest pressed close on either side, the trees bending over cracked pavement like silent watchers. The fog rolled low across the ground, pale ribbons twisting in the glow of my headlights. For a moment, I thought I was alone, just the hum of my engine, the rhythm of tires, and the black water of the lake beside me. But then the lights began to flicker. Not the headlights. Something above, a slow, humming pulse of pale blue, hidden in the fog. The silence felt heavy, as if the whole forest was holding its breath. And as I rolled to stop by the guardrail, the lake's surface rippled, not from wind, but from something rising beneath. I should have turned back. I should have kept driving. Instead, I opened the window, leaned out into the fog, and listened. That's when I saw it. The night was unusually still. A thin fog hugged the edges of the lake, soft and pale. I was driving slowly, the tires humming against the wet asphalt. The water stretched dark and silent to my right. Moonlight barely touched its surface, scattering like shards. The trees leaned over the road, their shadows swaying in a slow rhythm. Then I saw it. The road wound slowly along the edge of the lake. Evening had settled, soft and gray, draping over the trees. A thin fog hugged the water, blurring the line between sky and reflection. I drove alone. The engine hummed low. The tires whispered against wet asphalt. A flicker caught my eye. Small, pale, dancing lights across the water. At first, I thought it might be a reflection, but the rhythm was too irregular, too deliberate. I pulled to the side, heart slowing, curiosity pressing gently against my chest. The world narrowed to the lake. The fog swirled around the headlights, curling like smoke. Breath caught between the ribs of silence. I stepped out. The air was damp, smelled faintly of cold earth and decaying leaves. My shoes pressed into mud, sucking softly. The lights, they weren't steady. They flickered, dipped, almost disappearing, then returned. The surface rippled, not from wind. The lake remained otherwise still, like glass pressed against shadow. I leaned closer, eyes tracing the shapes in the dim shimmer. Something moved beneath, slowly, almost lazily, like it was aware I was watching. A vague outline, long, thin, darker than the water itself, shifted. Then it sank, and the lake returned to its quiet, indifferent calm. I wanted to speak. My voice caught. It was swallowed by the thickening fog. Only the light pulsed, faintly, teasing. I stepped back. Shivers traveled from the base of my skull down my spine. The water licked the bank softly. A rhythm like breathing. Another flicker. Closer this time. The outline again. Now unmistakable. It lingered just beneath the surface, as if studying me in return. I blinked. The shape slipped under, disappeared. The water stilled once more. Silence pressed down. Heavy, almost living. I tried to shake it off. A trick of the light. Fog playing games. But the memory of those ripples clung to my chest. Soft, cold pressure like a hand I couldn't see. The shoreline creaked as I shifted. Leaves rustled somewhere behind me. Static in the air, or just my mind stretching thin. I wanted to leave, yet I couldn't stop watching. The lake seemed to breathe. Slow rise, slow fall, whispers of movement beneath the surface. The lights flickered again. Not far now, dancing closer to where the trees met the water. I froze. The reflection shimmered. Stretched. Something beneath it stretched too, or so I imagined. A subtle hum, low, vibrating in my teeth, rose from the water. I swallowed. It didn't grow, didn't fade, just existed, alongside the ripples, alongside the flicker. I felt small, alone, and yet unable to look away. The outline appeared once more, only for a heartbeat, then gone, as if the lake itself had inhaled it back into darkness. I exhaled. The fog shifted. The night pressed in. Everything was still, too still. I left the road, slowly, deliberately, eyes flicking to the water, half expecting something. But there was nothing, only the faint reflection of the pale light, still trembling softly. Even now, when I remember, it lingers, a rhythm beneath thought, a quiet pull, like water tugging at the edges of sleep. I do not know what moved beneath the lake that night. I only know it is still there, beneath the silence, beneath the flickering light, waiting. The road stretched ahead, pale and empty. Fog hung low, thick and damp, curling around the streetlights. Night had settled deep into the trees, leaving shadows in every corner. I walked alone, my shoes pressed softly into wet asphalt. Each step seemed louder than the last, echoing in the quiet. The air smelled of rain and something faintly sour, like earth turning over. A chill pressed against my skin, creeping under my coat. Branches rustled above, whispering in the windless night. My phone buzzed. A crackle, a tiny burst of static. I tilted it in my hand. The screen was dark, empty. The static grew, soft at first, almost like a whisper, then louder, sharper, as if the hum came from the trees themselves. I stopped, heart tightening. The fog seemed thicker here, pressing closer to my cheeks, into my hair. The branches groaned, shadows stretching toward me. I breathed. The static hummed in rhythm with my pulse. Fingers tightening around the phone. The warmth of it felt strange, almost alive. A shape emerged at the bend ahead. Pale, motionless, too tall, too thin. It didn't sway with the fog. It didn't move with the wind. I blinked. The figure remained, unyielding, watching. The static rose again. High, sharp, slicing through the stillness. I tried to tell myself it was interference. Trees, lines, weather. But the hum, it hummed too closely. Almost like breathing. My legs moved before I could think. Soft footsteps pressing into the damp road. Closer to the figure. Closer to the bend. The fog seemed to pulse with it. Shadows rippling along the road. Each step heavier than the last. My chest tight, my skin prickling. I wanted to speak, but the air swallowed my voice. I wanted to run, but the static held me, pinned between fear and curiosity. The figure didn't shift. Its pale face, if it had one, was blank, eyes impossible to see. The mist swirled around it, hiding, revealing, hiding again. The static stopped. Sudden silence. Thick, suffocating. Only the fog moving, brushing against my arms, pressing into my hair. I stood there, alone, breath loud in my ears, heart beating in the hollow quiet. The figure remained, unmoving, waiting. I backed away slowly, fingers numb, phone clutched tight. The road ahead blurred with fog. Every tree a silent watcher. The night held me in its arms. Cold, damp, endless. I felt eyes along my spine, shadows brushing my thoughts. And then nothing, just a bend ahead, just a pale outline in the fog. And me, alone. I kept walking, slowly, carefully. The figure stayed behind, silent, watching. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it. The hum beneath thought, the static in the fog, waiting. The forest pressed close to the road. Night had settled thick and black. A faint fog curled between the trees, soft and damp. I drove slowly, alone. The tires whispered against the asphalt. Branches rustled somewhere beyond the fog. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and something metallic. A cold draft pressed against my neck. Each breath came slow, careful. Headlights appeared ahead, small, distant at first, then brighter. I squinted. The glow carved shapes from the trees. Edges of the road lit in pale, trembling light. My pulse slowed, or maybe it raced. It was impossible to tell. The lights grew closer, warm against the cold night, almost comforting, until they weren't. Mid-curve, they vanished, gone, as if swallowed by the fog itself. I slowed, braked gently. The road stretched empty before me. No glow, no motion. The guardrail gleamed faintly in the pale moonlight, untouched. No skid marks. Nothing to explain the absence. The smell lingered. Hot metal, car brakes, something burning, faint and unsettling. I stepped out. Air pressed damp against my skin. The forest stood silent, watching. Leaves rustled high above. Branches tapped softly, like fingers. My ears strained for movement. Only the hum of distant trees replied. I looked back along the curve. Nothing. Only the black road swallowing the fog. Only the faint trail of heat curling in the cold night. I wanted to speak, The words stayed in my throat. The empty road pressed around me, silent, heavy. The headlights had not returned. And yet, the lingering heat remained, as if the presence had been here, as if it had moved through the world and left only its breath behind. I climbed back into the car. The seat was cold, the steering wheel colder. I pressed my hands against it. The smell of burnt metal hung faintly in the air. I drove on, the fog pressing closer to the headlights now. Shadows twisting in the corners of my vision. Every curve I passed, I glanced back, expecting, hoping to see something, anything. But there was nothing. Only the road, only the forest, only the faint, lingering trace of heat, fading but still alive in the cool night. Even now I can feel it, a weight behind thought, a presence in memory, a question that refuses an answer. The road is still empty, the headlights still vanished, and I am left alone with the fog and the smell of hot metal and the quiet that follows a vanishing. The road ended where the trees pressed close. Night draped itself over the lake. Mist curled above the water, pale and shifting. A cabin glowed faintly at the edge of the shore. Warm light, soft and tentative, spilling between the dark trunks. It seemed forgotten, left behind, yet it waited. I stepped closer. The damp air pressed against my skin. The smell of moss, wet wood, and faint smoke drifted through the fog. Each step sank softly into the soft earth. The door was unlatched. I pushed it open. The air inside hummed, a low vibration that pressed against my chest, shivered down my spine, felt beneath the skin. The floorboards groaned beneath careful feet. The walls seemed to lean in. The hum rose subtly, almost imperceptibly, until it was everywhere. Around me, through me, I reached a window. The glass was cool against my fingertips. Outside, the forest stretched quiet, endless, the mist curling between the trees, a fox's shadow slipping between trunks. I blinked. The view shifted. Now a clear night sky, stars sharp and cold. I leaned closer, heart slowing. The cabin seemed different, smaller, too small. The hum thrummed faster. I moved to another window. The pane was black, void, no reflection, no light, nothing but endless darkness. My chest tightened, breath shallow. The hum pressed against ribs and lungs. Slow, steady, insistent. The floorboards beneath me vibrated. A pulse, gentle and unrelenting. The walls seemed to breathe with it. A rhythm not my own. I tried to step back. The door looked farther than it had moments ago. The cabin shifted, or had I? Each glance out a window showed something different, something impossible. I sank to the floor, hands pressed to ears. The hum filled every corner, every thought, soft, low, and unbearable. Outside, the lake whispered. Mist curled, curling into the cabin. The air smelled of wet pine and cold metal, sharp against the sweet rot of old wood. I dared not move. Fingers traced the grain of the floor, rough, damp, anchoring. Yet even that seemed to hum, resonating beneath touch. Shadows pooled in corners. The ceiling pressed down. Each breath a struggle. The windows shifting shapes. The forest, the stars, the black void. Time lost meaning. The hum continued. And I continued, unable to leave, unable to look away. I closed my eyes. The vibration lingered in memory, in bones, in chest. I did not know how long I sat, or if the cabin remained the same, or if I did. When I finally opened my eyes, the windows showed the void again. The hum, subtle, insistent, wrapped around the room. The walls seemed impossibly near, the floor pressing up. I could not breathe easily, could not move freely. Alone, contained, enclosed in the pulse of something that had no edges. And so I left, or thought I did. The cabin remained. Faint glow at the edge of the lake. Waiting. Hum, still thrumming. Beneath skin. Beneath thought. Beneath sleep. The lake lay still beneath a black sky. Mist drifted low across the water, curling around the old wooden dock. Night pressed close, damp and cold, settling into every crevice. I stepped carefully. The boards groaned softly beneath my weight. Each footfall echoed in quiet. The air smelled faintly of decay and wet wood. A chill brushed my neck. Rustling leaves whispered in the distance. Then I heard it. Soft, rising, falling. Whispers. Almost like chanting. But no one was there. I froze. The dock stretched ahead. Empty. Water glimmered faintly, reflecting pale moonlight. Each ripple seemed to echo a voice. I leaned closer to the edge. Mist curled over my hands, damp against skin. The whispers shifted, ebbing and flowing with the movement of the water. Too organized to be wind, too alive to be nothing. I dared not speak. The voices carried a weight, subtle, insistent, a cadence that pressed softly into the chest. Pulling, teasing, uneasy. I stepped further along the dock. The planks creaked beneath me, vibrating slightly. The water below shimmered with every word I could not understand. It felt wrong, familiar in a way that made skin crawl. The whispers swirled around me, some rising high, others low, vibrating beneath ribs. The lake seemed to hum in response, a rhythm not my own. I shivered. I looked back, empty, no one behind me. The dock stretched endlessly into darkness. The voices rose again, closer, and then receded, like tides pulling at the edges of thought. The boards under my fingers were cold, rough. The mist curled into my hair. The water reflected glimmers of movement that had no shape. I felt eyes pressing from the black beyond the mist, or perhaps from the whispers themselves. I wanted to leave, but the dock held me. The voices wrapped around memory and regret, a weight pressing into the chest and temples. I stood still listening. The ripples reflected pale lights that weren't there moments before. The whispering pressed closer, not threatening, not kind, just insisting. Time slowed. My thoughts tangled with the hum of the water. Each wave, each whisper, pressed questions I could not answer. I turned back toward shore slowly, feet pressing into the worn planks. The whispers faded slightly, but the unease lingered, deep and quiet. The dock receded behind me. The water shimmered, holding the voices, and I walked on, alone. Even now, I remember the way of the whispers, the way they threaded across the lake, the soft, relentless hum pressing against thought, a pull that remains long after I left the dock. The road stretched into fog. Night pressed heavy against the trees. Cold air seeped through the windows, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt and pine. I drove slowly. Headlights cut through mist, illuminating only the nearest trunks. The tires whispered against damp pavement. The mirror caught movement, just a flicker, a shadow in the back seat. I blinked. Nothing. The empty leather stared back. Then a pale hand rested briefly against it. Soft, cold, fragile, and vanished. My breath hitched, chest tightening. I swallowed, trying to anchor myself to the wheel. The fog pressed against the glass. Shapes flickered outside. Tall, thin, twisting in the light. Almost human, almost not. I forced my eyes forward, heart racing under calm effort. The road stretched endlessly. Alone but not alone. The hand returned in memory. Ghost warmth against leather. The pulse in my chest throbbed, echoing it. Shadows moved outside, some against the fog, some inside it. Impossible to tell which belonged to the trees, which belonged to something else. I tried to speak. No words came. Only the hum of tires, low and constant. Only the fog rolling and folding against itself. The mirror caught it again. A hand, a sleeve, a fleeting touch. Gone, and the seat was empty once more. I pressed my fingers against the wheel. Cold, damp, sweat forming without reason. The fog outside grew thicker. Shapes flickered, twisting closer, then away. A slow, teasing rhythm. My pulse slowed slightly, then raced. The fog seemed alive. The shadows, too. I drove, slowly, carefully, eyes darting to mirrors I wished I didn't see. The road curved, a tree leaning like it was watching. Shadows flickered. The leather remained empty, yet the memory of the hand pressed against me. I wanted light, wanted clarity. The headlights did not reach far enough. The fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I felt the isolation pressing, walls of mist and night closing around me, each breath drawn heavy with cold, damp air. each heartbeat loud and fragile. The shapes flickered again, just beyond the glass. Never steady, never clear. I glanced in the mirror once more. The back seat, empty, the hand no longer resting. Only leather, dark and silent. And yet, I felt it, the presence lingering behind thought, a weight on the shoulder of reality, an echo of breath I could not hear. I drove on, fog rolling, shadows flickering, emptiness pressing, alone but haunted. Even now, when I close my eyes, I feel the cold touch on the leather, the fleeting hand, the shapes in the fog, and the quiet terror of being watched when there should be no one there. The hill rose slowly above the lake. Night had settled, thick and still. Mist curled around the base of trees, curling toward the water. The tower waited at the top, rusting steel, jagged and old. Its red light pulsed unevenly, cutting through fog in irregular beats. I climbed slowly, feet pressing into damp earth. The air smelled faintly of rust, wet pine, and something metallic I couldn't name. The hum began as I neared, soft, low, almost imperceptible against the night. But it grew, layered, many voices, murmuring in unison. I stopped. The tower loomed above, its beams etched in shadow against the dark sky. The fog swirled around the base, brushing damp fingers across my coat. The hum rose. Steel seemed to vibrate beneath my hands. Fingers brushed cold metal. It throbbed against my chest. Not the wind, not machinery. I leaned closer to the tower. Red light pulsed above, irregular, teasing, almost alive. The voices hummed in rhythm, pressing into thought, echoing from the bolts, the wires, the rivets, the tower itself speaking. I reached out, hand hovered near the steel. Cold, sharp edges bit my fingertips. The hum sank into bones. A vibration I could not resist. The fog thickened. Whispers twisted into harmony. The lake shimmered far below, reflecting bursts of red. The wind carried faint metallic tangs into my nose. I tried to step back, but my feet stayed pressed into the soil. The voices tugged gently, irresistibly. Steel air mist, everything vibrating with it. I glanced down. Shadows pooled beneath the legs of the tower. They shifted, curling toward me. Or perhaps I shifted toward them. Impossible to tell. The red light pulsed again, slower this time, throbbing. The hum aligned, a single note rising beneath my ribs, resonating in the skull. I held my breath, fingers brushing steel again. The vibrations rose, filling thought and memory. I could feel each whisper threading through bone, through nerves. The fog pressed closer, wet against skin, soft and insistent. The air smelled of wet metal and cold earth. The lake shimmered faintly below, silent but aware. Time became meaningless. The hum, the tower, the fog, they were all one, a single pulse. And I was alone beneath it, yet part of it. I could not move, could not think clearly, only feel awe, fear, the vibrations crawling under skin. The red light pulsed once more, slow, steady, endless. The hum continued, layered voices, steel speaking through night. I stepped back, barely, breath caught in chest. Fog curling higher, wrapping around ankles. The lake glimmered, still and patient. The tower pulsed, and the voices hummed in unison. I turned slowly. Climbing back down the hill felt heavy, yet the hum lingered in bones, in thoughts, in memory. Even now I feel it, vibration under skin, the steel speaking, the red light pulsing unevenly, and the paralyzed awe of standing beneath something impossible. The lake lay still beneath a pale, waning moon. Mist drifted across the water, curling into the trees along the shore. Night pressed close, damp and cold. I walked to the edge of the water. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and algae. Soft mud pressed against my shoes. The quiet was almost unbearable. Then I saw it, a small rowboat drifting at the center of the lake. No wind moved it. No hands guided it. It circled slowly, predictable, yet unnatural. The water rippled around it in perfect rhythm. I leaned closer. The boat's empty hull glimmered faintly in the moonlight. Each turn left a shadowed arc across the surface. The hum of the night seemed to thicken. Figures appeared, or at least shapes, faint, leaning over the edge of the boat, silent, watching. I stepped forward, heart tightening. The air pressed damp against my face. The lake smelled colder here, sharper, metallic. I reached the boat, empty. No oars, no bodies, only the gentle rocking in perfect circles. I pulled back, stepping onto the soft shore. The figures remained, glancing, shifting, impossible to hold clearly in view. Every blink made them waver. The mist curled around my arms. A faint breeze moved across the water, yet the boat continued its endless, quiet turning, as if the lake itself carried it. I watched, frozen. Every rotation slower, deliberate. The shapes leaned, insistent. Yet when I approached, nothing. The water shimmered faintly. Ripples carried voices I could not name. Soft, almost like memory pressing against thought. I sat at the water's edge. Hands in mud, knees pressed cold against stone. The boat circled endlessly. Figures rising and falling with each pass. I dared not reach for it. The hum of the lake pressed against my ribs. The cold seeped into skin, into bone. Time slowed. Shadows stretched across the water. The boat's reflection shifted, as if it were something more than wood. I turned my gaze to the shore. Trees bowed in fog. Leaves rustled faintly. The figures had vanished, or perhaps I had never seen them at all. The boat continued to circle, silent, empty, and yet alive. I stood slowly, shivering. The mist pressed against my face. The cold wonder lingered in my chest. Even now I can feel it. The endless, perfect turning. The faint shapes leaning over its edge. The lake breathing beneath the moon. Cold, quiet, impossible. The lake lay dark and still beneath a thin, pale moon. Mist drifted across the shore, curling around the trunks of pine trees. The night pressed in, damp and heavy. I sat in the tent, the canvas damp against my skin. The smell of wet earth and pine clung to the air. A low hum of the lake carried softly to my ears. Then I heard it, soft at first, crunching over gravel. Steady, deliberate. I froze. The steps circled the tent. Slow, patient, always moving, never stopping. I strained to see. The canvas shivered with each step. Branches rustled somewhere beyond the fog. The air pressed damp against my cheeks. I dared to peek. Outside, only a trail of wet footprints led into fog. No one visible. No shape. Only the imprint in the gravel, glistening faintly. The footsteps continued, around and around. The gravel hummed beneath their weight. The tent walls shivered with each rotation. I pressed my face against the canvas. Breath caught in my chest. The mist curled around my hands, cold and damp. The smell of wet gravel, sharp and earthy, filled my senses. The trail of footprints glimmered faintly. Each step led deeper into the fog. Impossible to follow. Impossible to understand. I wanted to call out. My voice stayed in my throat. The night swallowed it. Only the gravel replied. Time slowed. Each step a heartbeat. Each heartbeat a reminder being watched. The fog shifted, curling closer, brushing my skin. I could not see the source. Could not see who or what made them. Only the endless circling, the damp footprints. The lake whispered. The trees pressed closer. The tent held me in its fragile walls. The footsteps never ceased. I held my breath, waited, hoped it would end, but the trail remained, winding into the fog, and I was left alone, with the crunching on gravel, and the quiet dread of knowing it could return. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it, the soft rotation of footsteps, circling endlessly into the night. The road curved through quiet fields. Tall grass brushed against the gravel, whispering softly in the night. The air was still, cool, the kind that carries silence for miles. My headlights touched something pale along the ditch. Small stones, half buried, smooth like river glass. I slowed the car. The wheels crackled over grit. When I looked closer, I saw the carvings, spirals and tiny star shapes cut into the surface. Old symbols. Careful hands. They didn't look natural. Too even, too deliberate. The breeze shifted. A faint hum followed, low and steady, vibrating somewhere under my ribs. I thought it was the car at first, But when I turned off the engine, it stayed, just beneath the earth, like the ground was breathing. I crouched beside the stones. The air around them felt warmer, and when I reached out, my fingertips tingled, almost like static. One of the stones had a fresh scrape across it, like it had been dragged, moved. I told myself they were just markers, old art, but that night, lie in bed, I couldn't stop seeing them, the spirals turning, winding inward. Outside, the wind shifted again. Something clinked faintly, like stone tapping against stone. I didn't move, didn't breathe. In the dark, my mind drew the shapes again, those same spirals, each one leading deeper, pulling tighter. By morning, I convinced myself it was a dream. When I drove past that stretch again, the stones were gone, every one. The soil was freshly turned, like someone had dug them up. A week passed. The thought faded. Until the night, I woke to a glow through the window, soft, pale, moving gently across the floorboards. I sat up, the air buzzed faintly, humming through the glass. And there it was, at my doorstep, one of the carved stones, perfectly centered, its spirals lit with dim, white light. I opened the door. The glow dimmed but didn't fade. The hum crawled up my chest, pressing deep in my lungs. The stone was warm. No footprints on the porch. No sign of how it got there. I stepped back, closed the door. The hum followed me down the hallway, soft at first, then fading into silence. I left the stone outside, but in the morning it wasn't there, only a faint circle of dust, and tiny marks in the wood, like something had pressed against it for a long, long time. Since then, I've seen others, by the roadside, at the edge of my yard, always half hidden, always turned slightly toward the house. Sometimes at night, I think I hear them moving, a soft scrape across the dirt, a low hum beneath the floor. The spirals keep turning in my head, slow, endless, and every morning I check the doorstep, wondering when the next one will arrive. The night feels different now, heavier, like the earth remembers something it's trying to whisper back. I try not to listen, but the silence always hums. The tunnel was older than the road that led to it, carved through the mountain, half forgotten, swallowed by moss and damp air. I stopped at its edge, headlights spilling into the hollow. The walls glistened with moisture. Drips echoed in slow rhythm. It smelled like cold stone and rust. I should have driven through, but the silence held me there, thick, waiting. When I stepped forward, the air moved, just slightly, like breath. A soft exhale brushed against my cheek. Then another, slow, steady. It wasn't wind. The tunnel had no draft. The air felt alive, shallow, rhythmic, pulling in and out. Each inhale drew the mist inward. Each exhale carried frost. The walls began to glimmer with it, pale crystals forming on rough stone. My own breath quickened. It felt like the tunnel was breathing with me. Or worse, through me. I whispered a word, just to hear my own voice. It came back distorted, thin, as if the tunnel spoke it back in a weaker tone. I stepped deeper. The air grew colder. Each breath I took came out slower, heavier, clouding the beam of my flashlight. Somewhere ahead, the frost was spreading, long white veins crawling across the wall, reaching toward me. And beneath it, that faint, hollow inhale. It shivered through the ground, through my ribs. I touched the wall. It pulsed, just once, like something large had drawn a breath. My chest tightened. I couldn't tell if I was breathing on my own anymore. The rhythm wasn't mine. I turned to leave. The exhale grew louder. The frost bloomed across the floor, wrapping around my shoes. The air grew sharp, almost metallic. My lungs burned. Each inhale felt stolen, taken from something else. I ran. The tunnel's breath chased me, faster, deeper, like it wanted me to stay inside its lungs. Cold air bit into my neck. The walls shuddered with each exhale, as if the whole mountain was trying to breathe me out. The light ahead was shrinking. I pushed toward it, gasping, until the last breath behind me sounded almost human. I burst out into the open night, collapsed by the roadside. The frost melted instantly, leaving the smell of stone and old water. The world was still again, silent, but the air in my chest didn't feel like mine. Each breath came too slow, too deep, and when I exhaled, I could still hear it, that faint echo from within, the tunnel breathing back. Through me, now even miles away, when I close my eyes, I feel it stir, a soft, hollow inhale beneath my ribs, patient, endless, waiting for me to return. It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour when even the crickets sound tired. I was driving home from the lake road, the one that winds too close to the edge, where the guardrail bends like a broken rib. The air was thick with mist. The headlights caught it in slow, silver swirls. Each breath I took felt damp, like breathing through cotton. That's when I saw him, leaning over the guardrail. A man, still as stone, facing the water below. At first, I thought he was injured. His clothes hung loose, dark and wet around the edges. His back curved like he'd been standing there a long time. I slowed the car. The gravel crunched under the tires. And he didn't move. The mist moved around him instead, curling against his shape, dragging along the rail. There was no car nearby, no sound but the low hum of the engine. When I stepped out, the cold hit like a wall, wet air clinging to my throat, to my skin. "Hey!" I called out, but the word broke apart before it reached him, swallowed by the fog. He didn't turn, didn't shift, just kept leaning forward, his hands loose over the metal rail. The closer I walked, the clearer I saw his face. Pale, too pale, like stretched paper over bone. His cheeks were sunken, his lips colorless, but his eyes, they caught the light, a faint blue reflection, not from the moon, something colder, something from beneath the lake. I froze. The air felt different there, thin, pulled inward, as if the night was holding its breath. He tilted his head slightly, not enough to look at me, just enough that the air shifted again. A faint ripple brushed my sleeve, like static in the air. I whispered his name before I realized I didn't know it. And then he exhaled. It came out long and hollow, like smoke drawn from wet wood. The mist swirled around his face, and in that pale blur, he was gone, not stepped away, not fallen, gone. The space where he'd been was empty. Only the faintest trace of vapor slid off the rail and into the dark below. I leaned over, looking for movement, but the lake was quiet, black glass stretching under the fog. No ripples, no sound, just stillness. I backed away, slowly, until my hand brushed the hood of my car. My heartbeat didn't match my breath. It fell out of sync, off tempo. I drove home with the windows up. Didn't look in the mirrors. Didn't want to see if something was standing by the road again. That night, I left the lights on, but the reflection stayed with me. Those faint blue eyes, they had looked empty, not lifeless, just waiting. Sometimes when I drive that same road, I glance toward the guardrail. There's always mist, always the same curve in the metal, and every time, for just a second, I think I see a shape leaning forward. Too still, too pale. The headlights pass, and it's gone. But the lake below, it moves differently now, like something breathing just under the surface. Quiet, patient, watching the guardrail. It started with a wrong turn, somewhere past midnight. The air heavy with summer rain that never came. I was driving home from the hills, windows half open, radio low, the road glistening faintly under the headlights. That's when I saw it. A narrow side road, half buried in vines and tall grass. No sign, no name, just a rusted gate, half open, like it had been waiting for someone to notice. I slowed down. The tires hissed on wet gravel as I turned in. The air shifted, colder still. The trees leaned close. Their branches brushed against the roof, scratching soft lines across the metal. It smelled like damp earth and old wood. The road curved sharply left, then right, then left again. A tight, looping path swallowed by the forest. For a while, it felt endless. No other cars, no lights, just a narrow beam from my headlights carving through fog. I saw a tree, a tall one with a hollow in its trunk. A little farther down, a faded wooden sign leaning sideways. Letters too worn to read. Then another curve, and there they were again. The same tree, the same sign. I blinked, slowed down. Maybe I had turned too early, missed a fork. I drove farther. The road dipped, then rose. The fog thickened, glowing faintly in the beams. But when it cleared, the same hollow tree, the same leaning sign. My chest tightened. I pulled over, left the engine idling. The air outside the window was heavy, like breathing through cloth. I reversed, slowly, watching the path behind me. Each turn looked identical to the one before. It didn't matter how far I went. The same stretch returned, like the road was folding in on itself. At some point, I noticed the fuel gauge barely moved. The clock on the dashboard stuck at 1:17. I tried turning back completely, full circle. The tires slid on damp gravel, kicking up pale mist. The headlights caught movement between the trees, branches swaying, but there was no wind. I whispered to myself, a small thing, just to break the silence. But my own voice felt foreign, too loud in the small space. The forest around me pressed closer. Leaves brushed against the windows like fingertips. The fog outside pulsed with faint light, almost alive. I gripped the wheel tighter, took the next turn faster. Another curve, another flash of the same hollow tree. I stopped counting after the 5th time. My phone had no signal. The map app froze on a blank gray space, as if the road didn't exist. I turned off the engine. The silence was complete. No birds, no crickets, just my breathing. Then a faint hum, low, almost mechanical. It seemed to come from under the ground. It pulsed, once, twice, then faded. I got out of the car. My shoes sank into the damp gravel. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on rust. The fog ahead shifted, revealing the sign again. Closed now, the letters clearer this time. I stepped closer, heart knocking in my chest. The wood was split, the paint peeling away, but I could still read it. Dead end. When I turned back toward the car, the headlights were gone. Everything gone. No road, no sound. Only the pale mist curling around my ankles and the faint outline of trees that shouldn't have been there. I started walking. Straight ahead, then back, then sideways. But every direction felt the same. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Each step echoed too long, like the ground was hollow beneath me. Somewhere behind me, the hum began again, deeper this time. Slow, steady, like the breath of something sleeping beneath the dirt. I ran, didn't matter where. Branches caught my clothes, pulled at my hair. The fog lit faintly, as if the forest itself was watching. And then, through the trees, a clearing. The main road, or what I thought was. I stumbled toward it, but when my feet touched the pavement, the air shifted again, and I saw it, the same hollow tree, the same broken sign, exactly where I had started. The hum faded into silence. The forest didn't move, and I finally understood there was no way back. The road wasn't forgotten. It was closed, sealed inside itself, and I was still driving it. Even now, somewhere between the turns, between the fog and the hollow tree, forever looping. Alone, it was past midnight when I started driving home. The sky had no stars, just a low ceiling of clouds, glowing faintly with the town's orange haze. The highway was empty, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel wrong. The hum of the tires, the faint rattle in the dashboard, and the radio hissing softly through static. I didn't remember turning it on. It was tuned between stations, white noise like a long exhale. Every few seconds it would flicker, catch a voice, lose it again. I almost turned it off, but something in me wanted to listen. The static rose, fell, rose again. Then, through the hiss, a sound formed, a whisper, low, almost too soft to be real. It said my name. I froze, hands tightening on the steering wheel. My eyes darted to the display. No station name, just blank numbers, flickering faintly. The voice came again, this time clearer. It said my name once more, then a word I didn't recognize. Something long, drawn out, like it wasn't made for my tongue. My throat felt dry. The air in the car had turned colder, thinner. I turned the dial slightly, hoping the signal would shift, break the illusion, but the static deepened. Beneath it, A rhythm, breathing, slow, measured, not mine. Then the voice whispered again, closer now, as if it had moved forward inside the radio. It told me to turn left. I blinked. There was no left turn ahead, just the empty highway stretching into fog. Then, as I passed a gap in the trees, I saw it, a narrow side road, half hidden, wet gravel gleaming in the headlights. I don't know why I listened. Maybe because the voice didn't feel strange anymore. It felt familiar, like remembering a dream you never had. So I turned. The car shuddered as the tires met uneven ground. Branches scraped the sides. The air smelled like rain and rust. The static softened, became a low hum. Then the voice again. Quiet, patient, keep going. The road narrowed. Trees pressed closer. The fog thickened until the world outside the headlights disappeared. The voice didn't speak often, just small commands. Simple ones. Straight, slow, don't stop. Each word landed inside my chest like a heartbeat. I obeyed without thinking. Somewhere in the fog, I thought I saw movement. A figure maybe watching from the trees. But when I turned the wheel, the radio hissed sharply as if warning me. So I kept going. The hum deepened, a vibration I could feel through the seat. My vision blurred slightly at the edges, and still the voice whispered, almost there. I realized somewhere deep inside that I was no longer afraid, only cold and tired and heavy with something I couldn't name. The road leveled out, the fog thinned, and I saw a faint shimmer ahead. Water, the lake, still as glass, the moon barely visible through the haze, just a pale circle above the surface. The car slowed on its own, as if the tires had forgotten to move. The voice lowered, so soft it almost wasn't there. Stop. I did. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. The headlights caught the rippling edge of the lake, where the gravel turned to mud. For a long time, nothing moved. No wind, no insects, only the static. Then a final whisper. Get out. The handle was cold beneath my fingers. The air outside stung, sharp with moisture and something metallic. The radio still hummed inside the car, steady and low, like a pulse. I walked forward. The mud gave under my shoes, dark water curling around my ankles. The lake was breathing, slow, like the static had become the air itself. Something moved beneath the surface. Just once, a ripple spreading outward, then stillness again. The voice whispered one last word. So quiet it barely existed. Closer. And I did, because it didn't sound like someone else anymore. It sounded like me, from somewhere deep inside the signal. Waiting. The hum faded as the water reached my knees. And then silence. Only the faint echo of my name, drifting through static from a radio I'd left behind. Obedient. And still. The lake was still, glassy and pale under moon. Cold air settled on my skin, and each breath felt like smoke in my lungs. I walked slowly along the shore. Gravel shifted under my feet, rustling softly in the silence. Mist hovered low over the water, clinging to my shoes and ankles. Then I saw it, a pale shape just beneath the surface. It drifted slowly, like it was floating without effort, human-like, arms reaching upward, but the water didn't move. No ripples, no sound. I froze. The fog curled around me, soft and wet against my face. A faint smell of earth and algae rose from the lake. I blinked, thinking it might be a trick of the moonlight, but the shape stayed. It was still, watching, waiting. I bent down, touching the cold edge of the water. The moon reflected in the ripples I made, but nothing stirred the pale figure beneath. I picked up a small stone. It felt heavy in my hand, rough and damp. I tossed it gently. The stone hit the water with a soft plunk. The shape vanished instantly. No splash, no trace. I stood there, heart thudding quietly in the stillness. The lake held its breath. The moon's reflection shimmered, distorted now, like a memory shifting in water. I stepped closer again. The fog thickened. The air pressed damp against my chest, and I thought I saw a faint gleam beneath the surface. A hand? A face? Something human, but impossibly still. I held my breath, the cold biting at my skin, and the lake answered with silence. Only my own heartbeat echoed back. The shape drifted again. Slow, deliberate. The water remained smooth, like glass stretched taut over the dark. I crouched, reaching my fingers into the cool water. It felt empty, smooth, but I knew something was there, just beneath. I backed away. My shoes squelched in the wet gravel. The mist curled higher, and the moonlight reflected pale trails across the rippling edge. I wanted to call out, but no words formed. The figure, it was gone again. Only the memory of it lingered. A human shape, impossibly pale, floating in a lake that refused to move. I stayed at the shore for a long while, watching the glassy surface, wondering if it would return. The moon drifted higher, casting shadows that shifted in the fog, and I realized whatever had reached for me beneath the water was still there, waiting, patient, invisible, but very much alive. I turned to leave, but each step felt heavy, dragging in the damp air. The lake whispered faintly in my mind, like a breath carried from below, and for a long moment I wanted to look back, to see it one last time, but I didn't. The memory of the white shape remained with me, imprinted under the moonlight, beneath the silence of the still, cold water. The lake was quiet, its surface smooth and dark. Mist rolled low across the shore, clinging to my shoes, cool and damp. I walked slowly along the path. Leaves crunched faintly underfoot. The air smelled of wet pine and earth. Somewhere, a branch shifted, soft, alone. Then I saw it, a pale blue light, hovering between the trees. It bobbed gently, as if breathing. There was no wind, no source. Another appeared, then another. They moved in patterns, circling, weaving, drawing me deeper into the woods. I felt my chest tighten. The fog wrapped closer, smelling faintly of damp moss and rust. Each step toward the lights made my heart hum. Like the forest itself was aware, the lights flickered, drawing arcs between the trees. I followed without thinking, feet sliding softly on wet leaves. I noticed that the ground beneath the lights was undisturbed. No footprints, no broken twigs, nothing to mark the path I was taking. The blue glow grew brighter, casting strange shadows. Branches stretched long and thin, their shapes twisting in the pale light. The air vibrated faintly, like a quiet hum beneath my skin. I could smell the cold water of the lake behind me, its presence faint but constant, and the earthy scent of the trail ahead. I stepped closer to one of the lights. It bobbed slowly, like it was inviting me. Every instinct told me to stop, but the light pulsed gently, entrancing. The forest thinned slightly, and the lights led me to a clearing, wide, open, empty, no footprints, no signs of anyone or anything having been there, just a faint blue glow lingering above the damp ground. The air felt thick, cold, electric. I could hear my own breathing, slow and careful, and the soft brush of leaves in the fog. The lights circled once, then rose slightly, bobbing higher before fading, leaving only shadow and mist. I stood alone. The forest was silent now. No wind, no hum, just a faint echo of the lights in my vision, like a memory too vivid to ignore. I wanted to move, to turn back, but the path behind me had vanished in the fog. The way forward was empty. I breathed in the damp, cold air, felt the soft mud give beneath my shoes. And though nothing moved, I felt eyes, somewhere, always, watching. The blue lights were gone, but I could still see them behind my eyelids, trailing between the trees, leading me somewhere I could not follow. I finally stepped back, feet hesitant. Each movement felt heavy, like the forest itself held me in place. The clearing remained empty, the mist curling at the edges. Shadows stretched long across wet earth, and the last trace of blue lingered in my chest, like a pulse I could not silence. I turned to leave, but the path had dissolved into fog. Every direction was shadow, every step uncertain, and I realized I had been led here, but not to leave. The lights were gone, but the feeling remained. Entrancing, cold, dreadful. I stayed a moment longer, listening to the softening of the lake behind me, the rustle of unseen trees. And I understood, somewhere deep inside, that I might never leave this place, that the blue lights would follow me always through shadow and fog. The night was thick with fog. The trees pressed close to the road, their branches slick with dew. The tires hummed against wet asphalt, a steady, monotonous rhythm. I was alone. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves and rust. Every breath felt heavy, like the fog itself weighed on my chest. Then it began. A metallic screech, sharp and sudden, like claws scraping across steel. It rang above me, jolting my spine with its unnatural resonance. I froze. The car shivered under my hands on the wheel. The hum of the tires seemed distant. Only the screech remained. I glanced in the mirrors. Nothing moved in the fog. No branches swayed. No animals fled. Just a lingering echo of metal against metal. My heart thudded. A low, slow rhythm that matched my breathing. The smell of cold metal, like rain on steel, filled my nose. I stopped the car. Silence returned immediately. The fog shifted, curling around the hood, soft and wet. The world felt impossibly still. I reached up. The roof of the car was smooth, pristine, no scratches, no marks, just cold steel under my fingers. And yet a faint hum lingered in the air, quiet, vibrating just beneath perception. It pressed at my ears and chest, like something waiting, watching. I stayed still, listening. The fog wrapped me tighter. Every shadow seemed to stretch, leaning closer to the car. The hum pulsed softly, rising and falling in a rhythm I could feel rather than hear. The smell of ozone and wet leaves grew sharper. My skin pricked, goosebumps crawling across my arms. I wanted to move, to drive, to escape the weight of the air. But the silence held me, thick and patient. Another faint screech, so soft I almost imagined it, brushed the roof, just above. Then it stopped. Nothing stirred in the fog. The car roof remained smooth. Only the faint hum remained, like a memory of claws or the echo of some creature's patience. I breathed slowly, trying to release the cold tension. The tires shifted slightly on the asphalt. The fog swirled at the edges of the headlights. I wanted to convince myself it was wind, a branch, anything explainable. But the hum persisted, low, vibrating, unsettling in its quiet constancy. I pressed my hand to the roof again. Cold, solid steel. Nothing else. And yet I felt it. Something had passed. Or hovered, watching, waiting. I started the car again. The tires hummed softly beneath me. The fog followed. The air pressed damp and thick against my face. The screech did not return. Only the hum, a reminder that something unseen had been there. I drove on slowly. Each shadow seemed longer than the last. Each breath heavier. The night held me, and I could not shake the sense that it had only just begun. The road was empty. Moonlight pooled across the asphalt, silver and cold. Fog hugged the tree lean, soft and damp against my skin. The lake whispered nearby. But as I drove closer, even its gentle lapping seemed to fade. The engine hummed at first, then nothing. The hum vanished. My tires rolled silently over the wet road. I breathed, a quiet, shallow intake. Even that disappeared into the air. No echo, no vibration. The world was muted, as if sound itself had been swallowed. I noticed it then. At the center of the road, a shadow waited, still, motionless. The fog circled it, curling against the asphalt like smoke. I slowed, heart pulsing softly in my ears. But there was no sound of fear, no rustle, no warning, only silence deep and thick. The shadow did not move, not a step, not a twitch. It seemed alive and still at once, like it existed between breaths, between moments. The fog pressed against the car, clinging wet to mirrors. The cold smell of the lake mixed with earth and something metallic, faint, almost imagined. I tried to speak. My voice vanished. A whisper, swallowed before it left my lips. Even the motion of my hand made no swish in the air. The shadow stretched slightly. Or maybe the fog moved around it. It was impossible to tell. The world had lost all depth, flattened into a gray, damp nothingness. I took a careful step onto the road, feet silent on wet asphalt. No crunch, no slip, only the hollow presence of the shadow waiting. The air felt heavier here, cold pressing against my chest. The fog brushed my cheeks and hair, damp, smelling faintly of pine and iron. Every sense heightened, yet stripped of sound, leaving only touch and vision. I wanted to turn back, to drive, to move, but the car's wheels made no sound. No direction felt certain. The shadow seemed to grow, or perhaps I shrank against it. I inhaled slowly, felt the damp chill fill my lungs, felt the fog press tighter. The shadow remained, patient, waiting without motion. I stepped back into the car. The leather was cool beneath my fingers. The fog pressed against the windows, distorting the moonlight. Stillness filled the space between. I drove on, though the road felt endless. The shadow lingered in the periphery, unmoving, its presence pressing at my chest. Even the lake had gone silent. My own pulse seemed loud. My heart beat against the ribs. The faint metallic taste of fear in my mouth. Every instinct told me to leave, but sound had abandoned me. There was no warning, no signal, only the shadow and the cold, muted air. It did not follow. It did not chase. It simply existed, anchored at the center, watching in the absence of sound. I kept driving. The fog curled. The moon glinted wet on the road. The silence remained. The shadow never moved. And in that quiet, I realized the terror was not in what would do, but in what it allowed me to feel. Alone, mute, observed. The fog lay heavy along the roadside, curling around the trees and stretching across the asphalt. The air was damp, smelling faintly of wet pine and earth. Each breath felt thick in my lungs. I drove slowly, tires hissing softly against wet gravel. Something flickered at the edge of the fog, white, pale, unmoving. I stopped. The shape resolved into a woman. Her dress was white, flowing and damp against the mist. She stood perfectly still, arms outstretched, gesturing toward me. Her face, it never shifted. No relief, no hope, only a blankness that pressed against my mind. The pale light of the fog reflected in her eyes, giving them a distant, cold shimmer. I stepped out. The fog wrapped around me, wet against my skin, clinging to my hair and jacket. Every footfall disappeared immediately, swallowed by silence. She did not move closer, but as I approached, I noticed it. She seemed to grow taller. Her shadow stretched unnaturally across the fog ground, elongating with each step I took. The air hummed with damp tension. A faint metallic scent hung around her, or maybe it was only the cold pressing in. My breath fogged in the night, but the mist around her remained still, untouched. I wanted to speak, but the words froze in my throat. My heartbeat thundered, but even that seemed muffled, as though the fog absorbed it. She raised one arm higher, palm open, beckoning still. The shadow twisted across the ground, longer, sharper, impossible. The trees leaned closer, their branches scratching the fog air softly. I stopped. Distance shrank and expanded at once, the roadside stretching endlessly. Her gaze remained fixed, unblinking, a calm and terrible presence. A rustle of leaves brushed my cheek. Cold seeped through my shoes, the damp gravel pressing into my soles. I dared not move forward. I dared not step back. The pale woman tilted her head slightly, though the expression did not change. The shadow grew again, swallowing patches of fog, stretching toward the lake behind her. The water reflected nothing, only gray and pale light. I felt frozen. My body wanted to flee, but my mind, held captive by her stillness, could not. I focused on her face, still blank, immense in the fog, as though time had slowed around her. The road, the trees, the mist, all paused, held by her presence. The wind shifted slightly, a faint rustling in the distance, but the woman did not move. The shadow remained, twisting and elongating, and I understood this was not a woman to approach. She was a shape of the fog itself, a mirror of stillness and cold, unyielding attention. I took one step back. The fog swallowed my foot. My breath left in a shallow exhale. The shadow stretched further, reaching across the ground, touching nothing yet pressing everywhere. I did not move again. The pale figure remained, and I stood frozen, drenched in mist and cold, in the presence of something beyond comprehension. The roadside continued on, quiet and unending, and there, in the thick of the fog, the pale woman waited. her arms outstretched, her shadow infinite, and I could not look away. The lake was still, its surface glassy under the moon. Mist curled across the water, soft and damp against my skin. The night smelled of wet wood and cold air. Then it began, a horn, low and distant, piercing through the silence. I looked across the water. Nothing moved. No boat, no light, only the pale reflection of the moon. I thought it was far away. I thought it belonged to someone, lost on the lake. But each pulse of sound shook the air against my chest, vibrating through my bones. I leaned on the railing, breath trembling in the mist. The horn grew louder, closer, not echoing, but deep, resonating inside me. I held my hands over my heart. It pulsed in time with the horn. The metal taste of fear filled my mouth, thick and sharp. The mist swirled around me, cold droplets kissing my cheeks. The lake remained still. No ripples, no motion, only the horn. And then I realized it was not coming from the lake, not from the fog, not from anything outside. It was inside me, a deep, unending blare that matched my heartbeat. Every inhale felt like inhaling sound itself. Every exhale shook the air around me. My chest throbbed with it. It vibrated through ribs, lungs, and bone. I tried to step back, but the ground felt soft, unreal. The mist clung to my ankles, cold and wet, dragging at my skin. The horn grew louder, not in space, but in the hollow of my own chest. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. The air pressed against me, thick and wet, and still the horn continued, unchanging, endless, an echo I could not escape. I leaned over the railing. The water was still, dark, moonlight shivering across its surface. No boat appeared. No figure emerged. Only the horn, inside me, blasting and hollow. My hands shook. I pressed them to my chest, feeling the vibration roll through skin and bone, a living hum that would not end. The mist wrapped around my shoulders, soft and suffocating. The night was quiet, except for what came from inside me. I swallowed, and the taste of metal filled my mouth. I breathed, and the sound grew louder, pounding against my ears, against my ribs, against the inside of my own lungs. The lake remained unchanged. The fog thickened, humming in sympathy, as if the night itself waited, patient and unmoving. The horn did not stop, and I could not stop it. I pressed my hands tighter, feeling every vibration, every pulse, like the lake had seeped into me. The cold settled in my bones. The mist smelled of wet earth and iron, and the horn never ended. I took a shallow breath, and it was a mistake. The vibration shivered through me, rising to a crescendo until my chest felt like it might burst. I stumbled back from the railing. The mist clung, the night watched, and the horn remained inside me, alive, relentless, unyielding. I closed my eyes, hoped it was a trick, a sound carried from far away. But it was not. It was mine, and it would not stop. I could only stand, shivering, alone with the lake, the fog, and the unending horn inside my chest. The lake was still, its surface reflecting the faint glow of my campfire. Smoke curled slowly into the night, carrying the scent of damp pine and wet earth. I lay on the blanket, listening to water lap softly at the shore. Above, the stars twinkled, a quiet rhythm that felt alive. Then they vanished, all at once. The sky became smooth, black, as if someone had erased the universe. No depth, no pinpricks of light, only a flat, impossible darkness. The wind stilled. Even the rustling of leaves paused, like the world was holding its breath. A low hum rose, barely audible at first, vibrating through my chest. I sat up. The campfire crackled, small sparks floating like fragile stars. But the hum grew louder, soft at first, then rolling in waves, threading to the fog at the water's edge. I noticed the trees. Their branches bent slowly toward the lake, not swayed by wind, but drawn as if the dark sky demanded it. The needles brushed each other, whispering soft, tense breaths. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the world around me. The water shimmered faintly, reflecting the firelight, but the darkness above made it seem unreal, like a mirror into something impossible. I stood, shivering, cold mist clinging to my skin. The hum pulsed in waves, echoing in the air, in the fog, and in my chest. Every step I took toward the water felt heavier, as if gravity itself had changed. The trees leaned closer. The fog thickened around my ankles, wet and cold. I reached out to touch the water, and it was smooth like oil, reflecting the empty black sky perfectly. I whispered my own name, but the sound vanished, absorbed by the void above. No echo, no reply, only the hum. I could see the outlines of shadows moving between the bent trees. No shape, no form, just darkness pushing against darkness, folding into the lake. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and metal, a strange tang that made my mouth dry. I sat at the edge of the water, bare hands in the cold mist, and tried to make sense of it. The sky remained a blank canvas, the hum a low, unrelenting pulse, and the trees leaned closer, silent, patient. The lake reflected everything, but nothing changed. I wanted to step back, to retreat to warmth, but the pull was subtle, like the hum was guiding me, drawing my breath into its rhythm. I realized I was trembling, but not from cold. Awe and terror mixed, heavy and sticky, pressing into my chest with a hum. The world felt altered, fragile and unreal, as if the night itself was awake and aware. The fog thickened around my legs, rising slowly, curling against my skin. The branches brushed over me softly, touching my shoulders, leaning, bending, reaching. The black sky pressed down, and still the hum persisted. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. Every inhale matched the pulse, and I felt suspended, a single point in the dark, held by the night, by the water, by the bending trees. The stars would not return. The hum would not fade. And I sat there, hands in mist, watching the lake swallow the reflection of a world I thought I knew, silent, alone, and terrified. The forest was quiet, thick with mist that clung to my clothes and hair. Twigs cracked softly beneath my feet, but the air was heavy, still, as if holding its own breath. Then I saw it, a faint light, swaying between the trees, pale, golden, almost fragile. It moved slowly, as if drifting on its own rhythm, not pushed by wind, not tied to a hand. I stepped forward. The lantern bobbed farther away, always just beyond reach. The smell of damp earth rose with each step, mixing with the faint tang of burning oil. The trees shifted around me, leaning closer, their branches brushing my shoulders softly. I reached again. The light retreated, floating ahead, like it knew my pace, like it whispered without sound. My breath fogged in the cool air, and every inhale tasted of wet leaves and bark. The lantern swung over a small clearing. I ran my fingers through the mist, touching nothing but fog. The air hummed faintly, a vibration that tickled my chest, soft and insistent. I moved faster. Branches bent and twisted, clearing paths and closing others. I thought I saw shadows in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, the woods were empty. Only the lantern glimmered, still moving, still just ahead. The hum in the air grew stronger. It resonated in my bones, echoing through the damp silence of the forest. Every step forward felt lighter, as if I was floating, pulled towards something uncertain. Finally, I reached out. My fingers brushed warm light. The lantern stopped. I looked closer. It was no lantern at all, only a branch, faintly glowing from within, twisting in my hand, warm and alive. The woods around me were still. No wind, no rustle. The fog clung to the ground like liquid. The path I had followed was gone, lost among the bending trees and mist. I held the branch, its faint glow pulsing softly, and realized the light had never been ahead. It had been leading me, moving with me, shaping itself around my own steps. I sat in the clearing, fog swirling around my ankles, and listened. The forest seemed to sigh, or perhaps it was me, or the lantern, or the shadows I couldn't name. The glow dimmed in my hand, soft as a heartbeat, and the forest, still leaning and silent, felt infinite, dreamlike, holding its own secret just out of reach. I placed the branch on the ground. It pulsed once, then faded to pale wood. The mist thickened. The lantern, or what had seemed a lantern, was gone, but the unease remained, soft and lingering, like a whisper I could feel against my skin, against my chest, against my mind. I walked back slowly, the path uncertain, the forest breathing around me, and I knew that some lights never let you go. The road ended at the lake, where the fog rolled thick and low, settling around the edges of an old gas station. Its windows glowed faintly, pale and humming, like it had been waiting. I stepped out of the car. The tires hissed softly on wet asphalt. A faint smell of gasoline hung in the air, mixed with the cool scent of the water nearby. The pumps clicked. Alone, in the still night, they moved without anyone touching them. The doors of the small convenience building creaked open, inviting, yet empty. I walked closer. The lights buzzed faintly, casting long, stretching shadows that pooled across the gravel. I could feel the hum in my chest, soft but insistent. The security camera above the door swiveled. Slow, deliberate. It followed me, even from a distance. I could feel its gaze pressing against my skin, an unseen weight that made my breath shallow. I stepped to the pumps. They moved again, clicking rhythmically, as if counting something. I reached for one, but my hand met only cold metal. No hose, no nozzle, no sign of life. A bell chimed somewhere inside the building. I paused. The air was still, yet the sound lingered, vibrating against the walls of the night. I couldn't place it. It didn't belong to me. I glanced at the windows. Shelves lined with goods, cans, bottles, boxes, but no one stood behind them. Everything seemed arranged to be noticed, yet untouched, frozen in a moment just before someone arrived. The camera followed every step. I turned slowly, saw its black lens swivel toward me, tracking, counting, observing. The clicking of the pumps echoed, a quiet rhythm under my skin. I stepped back toward the car. The door swung open slowly, as if someone or something had reached for it, but no one was there. I could feel a presence in the empty air, a pulse that matched the hum of the lights. The night pressed closer. Mist rolled from the lake, curling around my ankles. I could hear nothing else, no wind, no birds, no distant cars. Just the station, alive in its emptiness, watching, waiting. I moved again. Each step made the camera twitch. Each breath felt heavier. The pumps clicked faster. The lights flickered faintly. And I realized I had been alone the whole time, but never unobserved. I didn't stay to understand. The car door shut with a soft thud. I glanced back. The station glowed, its shadows stretching, leaning, the camera swiveling with precise attention. A presence that could not leave, that did not need to speak. The engine hummed, and I drove away slowly. The glow receded, but I felt it following me inside the quiet of my chest, in the spaces between breath and thought. By the lake, in the fog, the empty gas station waited. And I knew, even from far away, it remembered me. The road stretched thin beneath the moonlight. Fog clung low to the asphalt, curling around the edges of the trees. Every rustle of leaves sounded amplified in the quiet. I passed a roadside phone booth, old and weathered. Its glass was smeared, the metal cold and sticky under my fingers. Then it rang. Alone, I froze. The bell echoed against the fog, each chime vibrating through my chest. The road behind me was empty, the trees still and shadowed. I stepped closer. The handset was cold, heavier than expected. I lifted it. Static hummed. Soft at first, then a voice whispered. My voice. It described me. The breath I held. The way my hands curled around the receiver. Every step I had taken along the asphalt. Even the shallow pulse of my neck. A chill crawled up my spine. I glanced around. The fog seemed thicker here, clinging to my skin, wet and cold. Every shadow moved just a little, like it was listening too. The voice continued. It counted my steps in silence, matching the soft crunch of gravel beneath my shoes. I couldn't move, could barely breathe. It knew every motion before I made it. The bell above the booth rang again. The static swelled. A faint smell of ozone and rain hung in the air. I felt the booth leaning toward me, as if it were alive, pressing closer with every word. And then in a whisper it said, "Don't turn around." My heart stuttered. The fog shifted. Something moved in the shadows beyond the light. I could feel it there, just out of reach, waiting for my disobedience. I lowered the receiver slowly. The static pulsed, matching my heartbeat. Every breath felt loud, intrusive, as though it could be counted. 2. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves in a dry, brittle way. The booth's bell echoed faintly with every gust. It seemed to lean into the wind, its glass shimmering with pale reflections of something I didn't want to see. I backed away, keeping my eyes fixed forward. Each step felt measured, as if the fog itself remembered my passage. The road behind me stretched empty and endless, yet I could feel it closing in. The ringing stopped abruptly. The handset fell silent, cold and lifeless in my hands. I swallowed hard. The smell of wet metal lingered in the air. Shadows flickered at the edges of vision, never fully leaving, never fully there. I walked on. My steps echoed softly against the asphalt. The fog parted slightly, revealing the moon above, pale and distant. But I felt the booth behind me still, its presence pressing against the air, watching, waiting, silent. The road continued into the night. I didn't look back. Every breath I took felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of the voice still whispering in the fog. And somewhere in the shadows, the phone booth waited, counting. The lake lay still beneath a pale, restless moon. Fog drifted low over the water, curling around the reeds. The night smelled damp, earthy, and cold against my skin. I stood at the shore alone. The trees trembled faintly, their shadows stretching long and thin over the mirrored surface. A low hum pulsed through the air, soft at first, then deeper, vibrating my chest. Blue lights appeared, at first small, distant, hovering just above the water. They moved silently, drifting upward, casting a faint glow on the mist curling along the surface. The humming deepened. It pressed into the bones of the trees, through the wet earth beneath my boots. Water rippled toward the shore, though no wind stirred and no boat had moved. The lights grew larger, paler. They climbed, silently, until they loomed larger than the moon itself. The lake trembled beneath them, its surface lifting, curling into impossible shapes, like the water itself was breathing. I felt the presence first. Not near, not behind, but everywhere. The lakeside itself seemed to watch me, each tree, each rock, each misted ripple. Even the fog, thick against my skin, felt alive, attentive. The hum vibrated my chest and throat. I swallowed, tasting metal and cold water. Every breath felt heard, measured, mirrored in the stillness around me. The reeds quivered, though the air remained perfectly still. The lights pulsed again, flickering softly, larger now, reflecting in the trembling water beneath them. I felt the lake's pull, the hum's insistence, and the impossibility of looking away. I stepped closer to the edge. The wet mud sucked at my shoes. I could see shapes in the water, reflections that should not have been, shadows larger than trees, moving in ways the fog could not explain. Every ripple mirrored the lights above, every shimmer a silent echo of something beyond the ordinary. The hum grew, filling the space between the trees, pressing against the night sky itself. Branches shook as if breathing, leaves whispered in a language I could almost understand. The lake rose higher, the water curling upward, pulling itself into the air in quiet, impossible spirals. I realized then, with a chill spreading through my chest, that I was not alone. Everything here, every tree, every misted ripple, every stone watched, measured, observed me. The lights moved with intent. The lake responded. The entire lakeside held its gaze. I stood still, my breath shallow, my body pressed with awe and fear. The water hung in the air, suspended by some impossible force, and the blue lights drifted higher, bigger, more impossible than the moon, casting the night in a spectral, cold glow. The hum softened, but did not vanish. It vibrated in my chest, in the air, in the trembling reeds, and in the silence that followed. The lake, the trees, the fog, the water rising into night, all held me there, caught in something vast and unyielding. I could not move, not from awe, not from fear. I could only watch as the lights rose higher. The water floated silently upward, and the entire lakeside, alive, endless, unblinking, watched me in return. The moon, pale and dim by comparison, hung over the trembling water. I inhaled, tasting the cold and mist, and felt the quiet resignation that nothing would be as it had been. The night stretched on, the blue lights drifting above, the lake frozen in impossible suspension, and I understood fully that I had been witnessed. and that the witnessing would not end